Hello, good afternoon. I want to start by thanking you all for being here today. I know that weather is kind of rough outside, so I appreciate you all coming and bearing it to be here with me. Today you'll hear from myself and Dr. Theron Bowman from the Bowman Group with regards to the LSP top-to-bottom assessment. As we discussed before and as I promised, we would be at a point coming forth and delivering on the assessment and providing the results of that assessment. So that's what we're going to be doing today. But before I start, I want to thank Dr. Bowman for the immense amount of work that he and his team has done. This has been a long, hard road, but it's provided a lot of enlightenment, and it provided a lot of great information for us to move beyond. So I really want to thank Dr. Bowman and his team for all of the work that they've done, plus the tough conversations that we've had. I would also like to take this time to thank my team, my agency, our personnel, for the incredible work that they continue to do day in and day out. You know, this is a tough job, all facets of it, regardless of whether your support, your uniform, your investigative, or what have you. It can be tough not only on our individual employees, but their families. So I'm very proud and appreciative of all of their work and everything that they do to keep our citizens and our communities safe. But I'm also thankful to them for their unyielding support as we continue throughout this process and look for ways to become the best public safety agency in the state and in the nation. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not thank our governor, our legislative, our state leaders, and our stakeholders for their support. You know, it's been, again, some tough conversations that we've had to have, but they have been there, they've been unyielding, and they've really supported us throughout this process. So I'm very thankful to them for their continued support. This has been one of the most, if not the most, significant change at one time that our agency has undergone. And frankly speaking, this would not be possible if not for the support of our personnel and for our communities. You know, when you're changing the fabric of how you operate, you change the policies, you change the culture, then, you know, that has significant impact. And oftentimes when we see agencies falter is when they do not have that unilateral support. Here we have that support. Our personnel are in line with really wanting to be the best that they can be and provide the best service to our agencies, but also to our communities. And I'm so thankful to them for their continued support. Upon being appointed as the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Public Safety, as well as the Superintendent of Louisiana State Police in October of 2020, I immediately shared my expectations, not only to our communities, but to our agency personnel, which was for our agency to be a model of professionalism, honesty, integrity, accountability, and compassion. My vision was simple: work with our communities, work with our personnel, work with our stakeholders to make sure that we are the best public safety agency. And we are doing that by investing in our personnel, investing in our communities, by holding accountability and being held accountable throughout our agency, enhancing our leadership at all levels, and building trust within our communities at all levels so that we can continue to work together to increase public safety. As part of that commitment, I sought a third-party department and organization to assist us with a top-to-bottom assessment. And I think that's important because when we look at making these types of changes, having an objective viewpoint and perspective of your agency is vitally important. Sometimes when we're working in our agencies, we know what we know based upon our experiences. Having a third party coming in like the Bowman Group gives us a different perspective, gives us that ability to take that information, not only based upon what they see of our agency, but based upon the best practices that they've experienced throughout their tenure and their experiences. And that's been phenomenal. Our desire to collaborate with the Bowman Group for this assessment was simply born out of the need to take a long, hard, objective look at our agency and use that information to develop the information so that we could build a pathway to become the best public safety agency in the nation. The report being released today details the results of that assessment and identifies numerous opportunities for growth, advancement, and enhancement within Louisiana State Police. Every recommendation of this report is being carefully reviewed, and many have already been adopted and are being implemented. As I mentioned, over the past 3 years, we've embraced many changes, one being procedural justice as a guiding principle, and having worked tirelessly to establish a culture of transparency and accountability. Our policy and procedural reforms prioritize trust and legitimacy by emphasizing the sanctity of life and careful considerations of our use of force tactics. Some of the reforms I'll cover now, and this is just a small portion of them, but some of them, the changes that we have made, includes the revision of our body-worn camera policy, which expands the types of incidents that shall be recorded, increased supervision and supervisor video review requirements, specified actions to be taken when misconduct occurs, and establish requirements that cameras shall always be powered on and ready to record when on duty. Other revisions include our use of force policy, which establishes a ban on chokeholds and impact weapons to the head and neck area, except where deadly force is authorized and justified. The creation of a duty to intervene requirement for all of our employees. Mandates that our personnel carries a less than lethal weapon, and that's vitally important. We do not want to go from a conversation to shooting someone. And the creation of policy revisions to focus on positional asphyxia and requirements relative to officers' mindfulness of someone's need and ability to breathe. Other transformational reforms include oversight and transparency, such as the creation of our Force Investigations Unit to specifically investigate use of force incidents, including deadly force, retaliatory force, officer-involved shootings, and in-custody death. The creation of professional standards and compliance sections to oversee, coordinate, and implement numerous opportunities for growth and advancement of these policy changes. The creation of critical incident briefing videos to share video evidence with the public in our communities on critical incidents involving our personnel. The launch of our redesigned lsp.org website to provide a user-friendly and intuitive experience so that our public and community and citizens can find departmental resources easily, view policies, submit recommendations and complaints, and report suspicious activity. And not just in one language, but in 100 languages. Other improvements to our technological platform, which I'm very proud of, include a statewide e-citation and e-crash solution to reduce errors and provide accurate and real-time information. A modernized and efficient computer-aided dispatch and records management system. A newly implemented records request online portal to increase efficiency and responsiveness with the public and the media. And an interactive online portal being developed to allow for transparent viewing of our departmental activities. These improvements not only increase efficiency and accountability, but ensure consistent, fair, and unbiased enforcement across the state. Every one of these reforms will be futile if not for the improved community interactions and focus on employee training and wellness. Some of the other significant changes, which I'm so thankful of, includes our training academy change to a modern learning model for our cadets. And this training focuses on the development of interpersonal skills, stress management, and communication to better serve and interact with our citizens and visitors. We all know that when we encounter our visitors and citizens, how we approach those interactions oftentimes dictate the outcomes of them. Personnel also attend training on active bystandership for law enforcement, ABLE, de-escalation strategies, fair and impartial policing, emotional intelligence, and implicit bias training, so that we can establish a pathway of building positive public relationships, procedural justice, and officer wellness. Our personnel are encouraged to visit schools, daycares, businesses, and neighborhoods, and parks to interact with and educate our citizens in our communities on our safety efforts. This allows us to work with our agencies, but work with our communities and not apart from our communities. We've also invested in a variety of officer wellness and safety programs, including increased access to emotional, mental, and spiritual assistance. These are just a few of the many initiatives that we have underway. So as you read this report, I hope that you recognize that we are working diligently to address the various opportunities for change and growth. But I also hope that you see and recognize that the many things that we continue to have success in, which also contributes to the safety of our citizens and communities, such as being one of the most responsive, capable, and operationally sound agencies in our profession. We are committed to the transformation and dedicated to serving our communities with transparency, honor, integrity, and compassion. Before I close, I would like to ask Dr. Bowman to come up and discuss their assessment. Then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Colonel. It is my extreme honor to be here today with Colonel Davis and the Louisiana State Police, talking about the work that my team and I have been able to conduct here with the LSP here in Louisiana. First, it's unusual for a police agency to approach us or any consulting firm and say proactively, we understand we're not perfect and we need some help and we'd like your help. And for us to be on the other end of that conversation, to listen to the Colonel's heart and the state police desires, we first wanted to make sure that this effort would be earnest, that if we were brought into this organization, that they would take our work and our recommendations seriously. And the Colonel and his team assured us that this would be a serious effort and that they would take the recommendations seriously and try to implement those recommendations. And so from the start of our work, which has gone on now some year and a half, we came in before the U.S. Department of Justice came in. We came in looking at the agency. We brought in our team of subject matter experts, world-renowned SMEs that have been active in this space in police reform and looking at police departments, a team of PhDs and attorneys and other professional experts that that we've brought to bear on this organization to take a look at what opportunities LSP have to not just be a very good organization, to not just be the best police agency in the state of Louisiana, but to become a premier law enforcement agency in the United States. We wanted to see what LSP does well. We wanted to see what they don't do so well and what opportunities have existed to improve. And that's exactly what we've done. To make a long story short, we identified that the Louisiana State Police was very capable of being a premier public safety agency, but really lacked the ability to truly guard the public's trust. And so when you're policing a state, when you're policing a jurisdiction, you have to be as good at protecting public safety as you are in protecting and guarding the public trust. And so our list of recommendations, our observations of the department are, some are critical, some are not. Some are expressing satisfaction with some of the work that this agency is doing. Many things that LSP does are best practices and can be taken and used by other police agencies, but there are some practices, there are some policies, there are some training that we've offered advice to correct, and I'm fully convinced that LSP have started that process and will continue to do that. Ultimately, our role has been and will continue to be to make sure that the changes that are implemented in this agency under the direction of the colonel and the agency executive staff and then the employees that work for the Louisiana State Police not only are implemented, but they are maintained in a very durable way, where a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, those people who come to the state of Louisiana as tourists, and those who live and work and play here every single day will experience the Louisiana State Police in a way that's worthy of democratic policing, in a way that's worthy of a jurisdiction that operates, number one, through the rule of law. And that's what we've been able to bring here, partnering with the LSP, the colonel, the staff, and the employees here. So here going forward today, Dr. Ashley Burns, the project leader for the Bowman Group on this particular project, will come forward. Dr. Burns will talk more specifically about some of the recommendations that you'll see in the report. Obviously, because of time restraints and because the report itself is over 250 pages, we won't give explicit details. We'll be available some afterwards to answer questions, and into the future we expect to be available to continuing working with this organization and working with members of the public here in this state to bring forth durable change. So Dr. Burns will come and present some aspects of our report. We'll then answer questions at the end of her presentation after the colonel has had the chance to come back and close us out. Dr. Burns, I'll give it to you at this time.
Thank you. So I'm going to be giving an overview of our independent assessment of the Louisiana State Police. I'm going to start by explaining the process for the assessment and our approach, telling you a little bit about the team members who worked on the assessment, some of the findings and observations, as mentioned, that we thought were sound practices, but the bulk of this presentation will provide summary overviews of various recommendations related to the different chapters of the report.
Dr. Burns, we can have you at the podium so they can hear you on the microphone.
So as I mentioned here, the assessment overview, it's really important because as Dr. Bowman has mentioned, our review started last March. We came in prior to the announcement of the DOJ investigation, and we're very much in the weeds of the project by the time that that investigation was announced and it began. So it's a very proactive step to have an independent consultant come in to give us the access that we had to all of the documents and materials and all of the personnel in order to conduct this independent assessment. We also want to commend the men and women of the Louisiana State Police for being forthcoming in their feedback and their remarks, being participatory and collaborative in the independent assessment, and also being able to provide us both with critical information, but also primary insights for us to understand the day-to-day operations of the organization. So this slide talks about the objectives of the assessment, and we specifically were brought in to look at the policies, the procedures, the practices, training, and operations, with a specific interest also on accountability and oversight, transparency, and understanding the internal and external structure of investigations and also operations of the LSP. And so this is really important. And so when you hear top-down or comprehensive, that's what we mean, because we looked at 12 different areas of the organization, and we looked at it from the perspective of trying to understand national best practices and emerging best practices to make LSP a premier agency. So in many ways, to us, the Constitution is the floor. So we were looking to go much farther and above and beyond just looking at constitutional policing to really thinking about how to implement 21st century policing across the entire organization, statewide, and in every troop. The approach to this assessment was multifold. Last March, we started with a big document request. That part of the project involved looking at the LSP policies, their standard operating procedures, directives, basically anything written to guide the day-to-day operations of the organization. And then in the fall, we began qualitative interviews. We did focus groups. We conducted ride-alongs. We visited the troops. We did site visits. We observed classes and training academy and tried to kind of immerse ourselves in the organization, observing troopers and LSP personnel in their day-to-day activities to get a sense of how the day-to-day practices compared against the written policy directives and guidance that we had previously reviewed. The next step of the approach also involved looking at data. We admit that this is a weak area for Louisiana State Police. There is a need for much more comprehensive data collection, and so we did look at all of the data that was available going back in some instances as far as 2016 up until 2022. And so these different components are what we use to conduct this assessment, create our observations, and ultimately manifest the recommendations that you're going to see throughout the report. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the assessment team. Our team was made up of more than 20 subject matter experts from all over the country, former police chiefs, former prosecutors, civil rights attorneys, academics, data scientists, a really robust and diverse team of folks, and we tried in every area of this report to find the most talented people to come in and give expert advice to make sure that what we were recommending were things that would keep the agency future and forward-looking at the same time. So this listing just shows some of the different team members who contributed to this assessment project. So when we say the Bowman Group, we just want you to understand that it took many, many people to make this assessment happen in collaboration with all of the members of Louisiana State Police. The assessment covers 12 different areas, and so when you look at the report, it's organized around these 12 chapters. Each chapter of the report covers one of these topical areas, and within that chapter you can see an overview of how we conducted the review, and then you'll see a main goal, and then all of the recommendations are delineated in each chapter, and so you can read them kind of as one long, huge, massive report, or if there are specific topics that you're interested in, you can pull them out and look at them individually. And so those topics are Louisiana State Police's community policing and engagement, disciplinary complaints, especially looking at the external process as well as the internal process, and also internal affairs. We looked at use of force policies. The crisis intervention chapter has most to do with the SWAT team deployment and the special units. So that's related to crisis response in the field. We looked at fair and impartial policing, also known as the way that the agency conducts its stops, searches, and arrests, which is a primary function, right, of many of our troopers. And also we looked at organizational culture, LSP's recruiting and hiring, officer wellness, the early intervention system, and then we also looked at the training academy as well as LSP technology and their IT infrastructure, as well as their capacity for data analysis. And so these are all of the different components of the assessment that you will find in the report being released today. And next, I'm going to transition to telling you a little bit about some of the areas of LSP operations that we thought were sound, and then I'm going to proceed to providing you summary recommendations related to each chapter of the report. The first thing to note is these are just a few examples. So again, as Dr. Bowman mentioned, the report is extremely lengthy. I don't want you to think that we pulled out specific priorities, but these are really just summary overviews to give you a sense of the content in the report. So please don't prioritize things just because you're seeing them on the slide. We really do encourage you to take the time to digest the full report or the accompanying executive summary to get a better sense of the full listing of the recommendations. Each chapter has anywhere from 10 to more than 50 recommendations, and so on these slides, you'll just see a handful for each topic. So as it relates to IA, we do believe that there were some practices that are consistent with contemporary 21st century policing. For example, the investigators do serve primarily as fact finders, and they're also making sure that the interviews are audio recorded and included in case files, and that also that there's notice before and after complaints. As it relates to the use of force policy, there's been some revisions, but there are some key components in it. Here, I'm not going to read every single slide. I'm going to just give you highlights, but it is including that troopers have to intervene. It also includes that they have to prohibit the use of retaliatory force, and also making sure that deadly force is authorized. And so some of this language is in policy, but also we're going to see even more recommendations to further enhance the policies. Another strength of the LSP we saw is in implementing improvements in the accountability and transparency of its stops and searches arrest process. They moved to at least having a better system to collect information, and this is a really important key next step. And so the new inventory that they're collecting is going to provide much more comprehensive and robust information to understand the conducting of arrests statewide. And then also, we know when we looked at Academy, we can say that the staffing of Academy, they're extremely experienced, they're very focused and passionate, and they work really hard to make sure that the training academy operates in a sound way as far as delivering the cadet training as well as the in-service. And also, Louisiana State Police has high-quality facilities relative to other police organizations in the state. So those are just, again, a few overviews of things that we found sound. And so as you read the report, you're going to see a mix of observations related to current operations blended in with those areas for improvement, transformation, and to put in place better and best practices across the organization. And so each of those 12 chapters that I mentioned will open with the transformational goal. And underneath those goals, then you will see the recommendations outlined that relate to each of those goals. And so in community policing, you can see an agency-wide goal to embrace community policing as a philosophy so that it operates in a uniform way or a much more uniform way statewide, modeling procedural justice in the internal investigations process for Chapter 2 on use of force, ensuring force is used only that is which objectively reasonable, necessary, and proportional to the threat, and so on and so forth. And so in each chapter of the report, you're going to see a unifying goal that ideally, once the implementation of the recommendations is complete, we'll have achieved that goal for our state and for the agency. In the second half of the report, you'll see additional goals, for example, in recruiting and hiring to implement a more comprehensive recruitment strategy, ideally to enhance the diversity within the organization. Also making sure that the agency is embracing an early intervention program that helps it to seek and support out for officers who may be having issues that are impacting their performance at work in a non-disciplinary manner. But also a really important area is in Chapter 11 and 12. There's an extreme need to really modernize the data and technology of Louisiana State Police statewide and enhance its technical capacity and its analytical capabilities to actually take more data in order to have policing and law enforcement that is more evidence-based and also more data-driven. Next, I'm going to cover the recommendations. And so as I mentioned before, in each chapter on the slide, you'll see anywhere from 5 to 6 recommendations. However, when we get to the chapter on use of force, I'm going to highlight several recommendations. That is probably the most lengthiest part of the report, but also we know that that's a really critical area where we all want to see improvements in the long term that are sustained. So in community policing and engagement, the most important thing to keep in mind here is we believe that having a written policy that directs community engagement statewide will be a really important key step. Also making sure that there is more training that is about how to deal with the community in culturally sensitive and aware ways. Also making sure that the public is more involved and that they have access to all of the agency's non-sensitive policies and have the ability to comment, and really making sure that there's more communication back and forth between our different communities, our troops and headquarters about what's going on with LSP and making sure that community needs are being addressed consistently across the state. In the next chapter for disciplinary complaints and internal affairs, the department should commit to an open, fair, and transparent public access and communication regarding its disciplinary complaint process. One important highlight here is now people in Louisiana or anyone can go to the Louisiana State Police website and file a complaint on the website. So this is one improvement that's already underway, making sure that it's a more accessible process that people think has integrity. We think it's also important to analyze more internal affairs data in order to make sure that there's feedback loops to make sure that patterns and trends are also reflected in improving training across the organization so that we don't see the same issues coming up repeatedly, and learning from those past things. And also making sure that the department develops and implements more standard operating procedures so that there can be a more consistent process. I'm going to cover quite a few things here in use of force. I just want to highlight a couple. The first begins with establishing a more clear standard for when troopers are permitted to use force, making sure that policies define key terms in a way that people can employ that on the street and be directed in how to act and interact with people, as well as knowing how and when to de-escalate. Making sure that there's more clear guidance and accountability for first-line supervisors and investigating force. And really what you're going to see here is we're really impressing the department to better document force, to better hold folks accountable for force, to do it in a more consistently applied manner as far as tracking it over time, and also making sure that the disciplinary process that is intact has validity to it as well, and that it's applied the same across different troopers and across different incidents over time. There are also some recommendations related to equipment and tactics. For example, we believe that there should be consideration of prohibiting taser use when there's a risk of serious injury or if someone is fleeing or only suspected of a minor offense. We also believe that the department should make sure that it's making this use of force data more available and transparent to the public. And that also eliminating the use of neck holds is also an important element in making sure that there's protocols and templates in place so that when there is the highest level review of these incidents, that it's done again in a consistent manner. So as I mentioned, you should take time with the use of force section of the report because there is a lot of information there, and it's a key area of transformation, probably out of all 12 chapters of the report. As it relates to crisis intervention, it's going to be really important for the department to begin to collect more data about these deployments because oftentimes troopers are on these scenes with other jurisdictions co-responding, and that there needs to be a more intentional focus as well about having non-law enforcement responses, especially related to issues that may have to do with behavioral or mental health crisis response. For stop searches and arrests, we believe the department should draft a comprehensive policy that exceeds constitutional standards, but also making sure that there's better collection of stop data that is transparent to the public, but also ensuring that all stop searches and arrests are documented, regardless of the outcome of that interaction. As it relates to organizational culture and development, we believe that there should be more tracking of initiatives and priorities within the department, both internally and then also externally to the community, and that procedural justice is also a pillar inside the organization so that we see it manifest on the streets when LSP employees are interacting with members of our public. And also, the LSP may also want to consider seeking accreditation through a national program. That's the first half of the report. In the second half of the report, we turn to recruitment and hiring. There is a need to continue efforts to make sure that the personnel of the department better reflect the demographics of our state. This is still an area that is in continuous improvement, and I believe that the organization is continuing to work to diversify with, for example, having people of more different backgrounds actually hired as troopers and as cadets over time. Making sure that the department is standardizing the process for promotion within the organization as well as testing along the way. And so these are areas within recruitment, hiring, and promotion that we think are going to be really important, as well as making sure that the criteria for promotions is transparent and fair for all who are seeking to have advancement in their professional careers at Louisiana State Police. The next chapter is about officer wellness. This is a very challenging time to be a law enforcement officer anywhere, and so making sure that troopers have the resources that they need as it relates to their personal well-being is a really important area, and making sure that that is available evenly across the state, so that if I'm a trooper in Monroe or New Orleans or Shreveport, that I'm still having access to the care that I need for my family and myself in the event that I'm, for example, seeking assistance after a traumatic event, or if I have issues at home that may impact my performance at work. So this is part of a recommendation to also develop a fit for duty evaluation policy, which is also a best practice, and also doing a needs assessment to have an understanding of what trooper needs are and what the gaps may be in providing them, and also making sure that the care providers that troopers have access to are clinicians who are familiar with the law enforcement environment. Early intervention is really important, and this is an area of weakness that we think is going to be a big benefit once it's strengthened for the organization. A good early intervention program is a way to retain employees, but also it's intended to be non-disciplinary in nature, and it's a way to protect careers and also troopers before bad things happen. And so a good early intervention program gives a department an opportunity where a supervisor can have a way to identify employees who may be troubled before an incident occurs or before it actually manifests into something happening in their performance at work. And so we think that this is going to be a big benefit to the department to put in place a robust, true, comprehensive early intervention program, and that it's also going to be really important for all of the employees and supervisors at State Police. The last chapter on training is lengthy, similar to use of force, because it covers the selection of instructors, the way the curriculum is developed, the overseeing of day-to-day operations, as well as field training. And so you're going to see many recommendations in this area split across 5 or 6 different subtopics. But we also believe that the Training Academy should establish a training oversight committee, that there should be an annual or biennial needs assessment where we actually look department-wide at what the training needs are and make sure that that is incorporated so that folks get the ongoing professional development and continuing education they need, as well as new topics that may be introduced to cadets as well, and also making sure that there's a policy that's better directing the day-to-day operations of Training Academy. Finally, as it relates to technology, as we've mentioned today, there's a lot more new technology in the agency. There's a CAD system, there's new records management systems being put in place, there's all types of new equipment. And so we recommend that there be a step back so that the agency has an IT strategy so that this isn't done piecemeal but done seamlessly in a way where everyone can benefit from the new technological capacities in a way that won't cause confusion or create administrative burden on troopers in the field during this time. and also making sure that there is a centralized records section. Right now, much of the information is dispersed all across the state, across different troops, and a lot of the information that actually directs what's happening at LSP is not provided in an easily kind of accessible or transferable format. And so again, this is one of the antiquated areas that truly is a high priority to bring the agency to the 21st century. And then finally, as I mentioned, the goal for technology, you're not going to see recommendations in that chapter, is to leverage it, right? Because there is just not a lot of information out there to do effective data analysis. And so you're going to see a chapter where we've done our best to analyze the available LSP data, but there needs to be much, much more comprehensive information available for the communities and the residents and even the organization itself to truly get a grasp of what's going on, because there's just so little centralized, electronically available, longitudinal, comprehensive information related to much of these activities that I've outlined in the 12 topical areas. So this is an overview of the report. It also comes with an accompanying executive summary that provides this similar overview as well as an enumeration of all of the recommendations throughout the entire report. But we just want to reiterate that we think that this is a really important moment, but that with these recommendations, the Louisiana State Police can kind of go above and beyond even the notion of just constitutional policing to an organization that's really one of the best in the state and the best in the country, and willing to kind of go above and beyond just fixing the deficiencies we saw, but wanting to put in place even better practices and not just getting average, but being well above average to excellent. And so we are really grateful for the opportunity to conduct this independent assessment. We hope that the report is accessible and digestible, and that we will continue to follow the organization as all of these recommendations are considered over time. So thank you, and that is going to conclude this overview of the independent assessment report.
So at this point, I'll go ahead and open the floor for any questions that anyone has. Yes, sir.
I apologize if I missed it, but how long was this assessment? What was the length of time of this assessment?
Well, it started in March of 22. So as you can tell, it's taken some time to really take a deep dive into our agency. You know, we're a very large agency in the state, one of the largest as far as law enforcement, and not only large but complex because we are a statewide agency. And, you know, we're not just touching state police, we also touch other agencies, other law enforcement agencies, and other public safety agencies within the Department of Public Safety.
And just a quick follow-up, sir, on the first Roman group. I know you guys mentioned that there was some things that you guys, in y'all's assessment, there were some qualities that were really good that other departments around the country should take note of, and then others not so good. I know you mentioned data collection. Could you just kind of be very specific about what you thought was the most promising things going on in the department and not so good?
Sure. Dr. Burns actually put 4 slides up that talked about some of the current operations and for example, the policy of completing IA investigations in 60 days, having IA investigators focus on fact-finding or considered best practices. So there are many. It'll be easy to discern those when you get into the report because we highlight both the good and the bad, but there are several that we will recommend to other clients that we have based on what we've been able to see here at the LSP.
Any other questions?
David, you said that a lot of these policies have already started to be changed and implemented, but what are some that maybe you're still working to get into action with?
Well, really, and it was touched on with regards to the technology. You know, information is power and knowledge is power. So it takes time for us to implement a lot of these databases. Some of the databases that we were using were 30 years old. And as such, that inhibited our ability to actually pull out quality data, quality information, not just from an operational standpoint, but from an employee management standpoint. So when we do not know what our employees are doing, and that means that we can't build consistency, fairness, and equity in that process. So by implementing these systems, and it's taking time, and I want to temper everybody's expectation. You know, oftentimes when we talk about making these changes, we think, well, it's going to take 2 months, 6 months. some of these changes are going to take years. We're pulling our technology again out of the Stone Age in certain respects. So that's going to continue to take years because it's not just an implementation. Dr. Bowman spoke of, and Dr. Burns spoke of, being able to integrate that technology, integrate that information, and then analyze it in a manner that we can make positive changes. So that's one of the areas that we've done well in. However, we still have a ways to go because although we've implemented some of those technologies, we still have to integrate them in a manner that we can seamlessly pull the information and use it.
And to follow up on that, the general public really is interested a lot in new supports, obviously, and so has there already started new training policies on these, some of the recommendations that they have in this report?
Yes, and when we look at our training academy, oftentimes, training and our operations and our behavior starts when our cadets enter the training academy. By moving to a more modern training environment, adult learning as opposed to paramilitary, then that's changing the atmosphere. That's changing the behavior of our cadets and our newly graduated troopers. So they're now coming out with a different mindset, more critical mindset, a better comprehensive behavior and really activity and interaction with our communities. And that's what we're ultimately wanting to achieve. We want our troopers to go home safely. We want our citizens and visitors to go home safely. And in order to achieve that, then we must start at the beginning. We must look at our training, not just policies, but look at our training and ensure that our training is commensurate with that goal of everybody going home safely.
And how many classes have you had under this new modern training so far?
Believe it or not, we just had our last academy class that was fully integrated with this new model. So we have our new cadet class in right now, and they're going through that same model. And we've already begun to see, again, some of the benefits of that. That is one of the areas that other state police agencies have come and wanted to take a look at because, again, when you're looking at having better relationships and better outcomes and better safety, then that's worth making a change.
I'm just going to ask real quick, what area do you guys think needed the most work? What did you guys find really needed the biggest change on the entire department?
So I think our policy and the management of our policy, the policy drives culture. And it's important for us to, when we look at policy, oftentimes we make a change in policy, but we did not implement the training and provide the training value that would also coincide with that policy. And that was one of the more critical things that the Bowman Group showed us. When you are looking at changing policy, oftentimes policy is interpreted certain ways. So we want to make sure that when we incorporate, especially our operational or use of force type policies, that we're also providing necessary training that puts everybody on the same page. It also builds expectations and, again, achieve better outcomes. Okay. There are no more questions. I really want to thank you all again for coming out and thank you for your support of our agency. We have some phenomenal people. We have some great public servants. We have people that are sacrificing their lives and sacrificing their times. Just the other day, I attended a memorial whereby one of our troopers that had passed away and other law enforcement and EMS and first responders that had passed away came to our department. There is no better position or no better place to be in than to serve our communities. For us, this is not just a job. This is a vocation. This is a calling. This impacts everything that we do. So we take it seriously. And we're taking this change seriously so that we can be better professionals. We can be the best that our communities have to offer. I remain extremely proud of our personnel. I remain proud to lead them. I remain proud to serve with them. And I remain extremely proud to represent them. I'm so proud of them for taking on this, not only challenge, but these opportunities. And again, I want to thank them for everything that they do. So again, thank you all, and God bless.
Thank you. We have some handouts